I think there's like a real like bravery. I have to call it a bravery or a courage to really like be able to constantly meet people, um, meet and connect for relating on a deep
Yeah.
level. And deep doesn't really necessarily have to mean like I want you to not get me wrong. Like deep can be that, your neighbor comes over for coffee and you are in some thought that
Mm.
has been with you for days, and then somehow like through that ritual the thought gets unknotted.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say deep. So it's not superficial. And it's also because your neighbor is also in a thought for days that needs to be unknotted,
Yeah.
and you're doing it together.
Yeah.
And like, but I think it takes so much bravery, even more now, to be able to do that in each encounter with people, because it's somehow, I don't know what exactly is it that keeps coming between us, between people, that keeps getting in the way of people eh, relating to each other, on like connecting on in a meaningful way. Um, but I'm scared that that's sort of here already now, and it's because
Yeah.
I also feel, even within me, I feel like, oh, like that sounds scary.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Other Armenias podcast. I am your co-host, Tamar Shirinyan.
And I'm your other co-host, Milena Abrahamian. As you can see, we're in the same place.
Yeah, so it's a very special episode. I have been in Armenia for almost 2 weeks now. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that, being here, what that means. But before we get into our episode, please subscribe if you have not subscribed. Like this episode. Go and like all of our other episodes. Comment and share. Please also find us on Spotify and rate us there. And also comment and follow us. Okay, so
So what we wanted to talk about today, since we're in the same place, is Armenia as a meeting ground, as a place where so many people come from the diaspora, especially in the summertime, to kind of meet people, meet family, meet their friends, just meet people they know, and also to just be here. So yeah, and then sort of how it's been since Tamar has been here, and what we've been up to. So that's the plan for today. So what do you think about Armenia as a meeting ground? Where did this idea of sort of seeing Armenia as a meeting ground come from?
yeah, so that's how we always end up here. And a lot of diasporans end up here. And it's also interesting that anyone not here, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but anyone not here is considered diasporan, whereas some other Armenians are actually older than this place.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also, Armenia is both, the other Armenias, the various deterritorialized places where Armenians live and where Armenian communities thrive. But Armenia is also a nation state, and this is the territory where that nation state exists. And so a lot of Armenians come here looking for homeland, feeling it as their homeland, which is something that I think we have to be very careful about.
Yeah, I always found it interesting because, like, even for me, I mean, we were talking earlier today, even for me, it's hard to, I mean, what does this word even mean? I mean, Armenia is home to me, right? I was born here. I remember there was a time, so I mean, to be fair, because I was born in Armenia, and I lived here, so I was socialized here,
Yeah.
which means that I was also socialized a certain way to sort of relate to diasporan Armenians a certain way. So during this time that Tamar has been here, we were in Stepanovan, and there was, or I don't remember, during these days actually, I don't remember when it happened, but some woman looked at me, I think it was the woman in the shop, and said, "Akhbares." And it's
I
like,
didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah, she asked me that, and I was like shocked because I was like, people all the time like ask me
Wow.
if I'm from Iran, like if I'm Iranian, Armenian, or if I'm like from another place, but no one has ever said like akhbar to me. But I remember growing up and this word,
Which is a really derogatory
yeah,
word.
and that's why I felt it this way because when I was younger, I didn't know, let's say like I have not made the connection of how it's derogatory, like you're saying it now, because I remember, I think it means yeghbayr, no? Like it means brother.
Yeah, but it also has the part of it, the pride.
Really?
Yeah. My dad was Akhbar. My dad came to Armenia from well, my dad was born in Armenia, but my dad's family came as Akhbars from
Uh-huh.
Western Armenia. And yeah, it was used as a derogatory term for people who came from outside.
But for me, being from here and hearing this word about other people when I was younger, it was not about me, it was about others. And so like for a long time, I think I was like, especially because at some point I had to come to terms with that, with the fact that I'm also diaspora now. I mean, I live here now, but there was a period of my life and my family is in the diaspora. And it's a very particular diaspora. And I remember we always wanted to dissociate ourselves from that diaspora. It's
Hmm.
like we were almost in denial that we are also now diaspora. It was that like somehow
Hmm.
it was something else. We were something else, you know? And I think part of it is because there is this like association with being akhbar that's scary, that's shameful, that's like lots of things, right? Where why would it be derogatory? Why would people here look at this as a derogatory thing or like, see those who are from Western Armenia and other places who ended up in Armenia in whatever time they did, whether that's during the Soviet Union, later, after, now, why, what, like, why was, to me, it's connected to like, I don't know, to me, it's connected to the shame of like accepting people who are survivors of genocide. Because I don't
Yeah.
know if, for example, were Iranian Armenians considered Akhbar?
I
Maybe
don't
at some
know.
point they all came under the same thing, but I think originally it probably meant those who are from Western Armenia, no?
I think it has to do with the call for repatriation and
Mhm.
then Armenia or the Soviet Republic of Armenia getting filled with all of these people who came from all of these other places and brought with them all of these other ways. Um, yeah, but I don't know
Other
if
from what? That's my question
yeah,
always. When we come to Armenia, my question is always other
what
from
is
what? From
other?
what?
Yeah.
Like, because this is also the periphery. I understand that it's like a nation state. It has a like more of like legitimacy in a way as an Armenian
Yeah.
homeland. So I understand that part. Um, but still to me it's like really like you're gonna you're gonna be a periphery yourself and be like peripheral or like I mean this place, people from this place
Which
who
is
are
a place made up of not any one people, right? And like what
what
is
do you
other like I think what you're pointing out is like other from what, as in why are the ways of making life and everyday practices and all of that that are here considered the normal way.
Yes.
And then everything that comes from outside is Arp.
But also the things here, they are coming from. I don't know. Like I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, it's very interesting that, we have all of this food now here for the past more than 10 years, since with the Syrian Armenians coming in 2010, 11, the Lebanese Armenians coming in, and bringing these foods that were not here before, that were not here 15 years before, like falafel and hummus and all of these things that are coming from like these are Iraqi Armenians. Actually, Iraqi Armenians came even before, but I don't know if they had some. I think it also has to do with like class and owning things to be able to open shops and stuff. I don't remember any Iraqi Armenians ever opening shops. But like the foods that have been brought here that we didn't have in the Soviet times also, and we didn't have right after the collapse, right? We had other foods like dolma and these other things that are a bit more, let's say, like coming from like the more Turkish side, or like not Turkish, but like those akhbars, let's say, bringing these things maybe, or maybe these things were already here,
but also indigenized in these ways. Like, so because I grew up in a family that was, my dad's side is from here, or my dad is from the Republic of Armenia, and but his mother came, and his mother and father came from Western Armenia. But my mom grew up in Syria and Lebanon, and so these two things merged. And there was always, like, in my household, the correct and the wrong way of making certain foods, right? So like Armenians from the Republic like make dolma, like especially like the vegetarian dolma with um like lentils and like parsley, like not parsley, but like cilantro, like hummus and stuff. And my mom always thought that was like wrong.
But you say Armenians from Armenia, like there are so many different ways that Armenians in Armenia make the same foods. Like I've never, to me, it's weird that any Armenian from Armenia would make vegetarian dolma. Like it's weird. It's not something, to me, I'm like, that's not that's probably coming from outside Armenia, from the diaspora, from some other place. It's not coming from Armenia. But then you see that there are like between regions, like Luz is from Rapan. In Rapan, they make sapas in a very specific way. They make it with rice. In Yerevan, you make it with barley. And it's like each one can look at the other and say that's weird, but like that's what I say when I say even inside of Armenia, like how is there any point where we can like say this is the central and the main that everything else compares itself to? I don't know if it actually exists. That's the thing. In reality, I think it's something in our heads that it exists. Maybe in other places it's easier to like just maybe what confuses us is that we see Armenia as as legitimate because of its nation statehoodness, and from there we assume that that's how it functions. But I don't really think that's how it works, and I don't think it's ever worked like that, and that's why I don't think it makes sense for us to be that. If you really think about it.
But there is like, it's not that whole thing about coming to Armenia to feel like you're in Armenia and to like return to some kind of authentic experience. That's not why I ever came to Armenia. I can't say I returned here. I wasn't born here. My father was born here. I came to Armenia for very different, equally problematic, I think, reasons. I came to do research. Right. And it was like,
but it's better you do it than some other people who are like not no connection with Armenia and they just want to be experts in Armenia. I would rather you do it than others, honestly.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking a lot about how it would be really great if other people did research in Armenia to like deprovincialize knowledge about Armenia and make connections to wider forms of knowledge. That's not just like,
I see what you're
here's
saying.
this thing about Armenia and Armenians need to know this, because I think that actually, there's a lot of really interesting things about Armenia, about the Republic of Armenia for me, and I maybe we'll talk a little bit about it, like especially in Stepanovan, that I think is not just because I'm Armenian that's interesting
I
to
hear
me,
you.
like, you know, but I think
I
that there's
think,
this other reason why a lot of people come to Armenia. And there's something really problematic about that for me. Like, on the one hand, I understand it. Um, but on the other hand, like,
yeah.
there's that birthright,
Yeah.
right? Which is both an organization as well as an actual affective experience, right? People feel like by birth they have the right to this land. But the one thing that really always, got to me was the way in which diasporan Armenians come here to help.
Yeah.
And there are, of course, like, I'm not against helping.
Yeah.
But there's this way of like knowing better and then coming here to help and then realizing how bad things are done here and how much things need to change. And then there's complaining about things here. And I remember that in conversations I've had with people actually in Birthright, right, who are like school teachers, for example, and they hate it because for them, the way in which it's done is so terrible. And there's something about how backward people here are, and there's just like no teaching them the correct way of doing things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I also came back here and I had mm, um, it's like really strange how it can be like, almost like the reason why people come here and think that they can help, or that it thinks that it's just a way of othering people. Actually, it's a way of doing this like us and them thing, like, oh, they're different from me, and the way that I know to be true is this way, and they're doing it another way, and that's wrong. Because I think that it's very easy for that to happen even to someone who's born here and who's, like, even for me, like I could fall into this kind of thing. But instead of that, but it's a genuine thing. But I had to come to that because I had to understand that I was so brainwashed is maybe not the best word, but I really believe that when you are wherever you're living, whatever land you're living, affects your body and your mind and your psyche. Like, it does something to you in terms of like making you behave and think certain ways and even feel certain ways, just because that's where you are, that's where your feet are on the ground. So, like, I think it's normal that if you're somewhere, I remember actually, like, one of the first days that I ended up here in 2010, that was the first time I came back to live here. And I was really confused, like, why am I even here? What am I doing? Like, some force just threw me here, actually. Like, I feel like it wasn't really much well thought out, like, And then I remember, like, one of the days, it was very early on, I was still in a daze, like in a kind of moment of like when you're between sleep and wake state. So it was my state of being between the new world and the old world, that if you will, And I remember like looking at something on, like, maybe reading news, I don't remember what it was, and I remember being like, holy fuck, like, what did I just escape from? Thinking about the US. Like, I felt like I escaped from a war zone. It was very strange. I don't know why I felt like that. I felt like not a war zone, but I felt like I escaped from some kind of a war that was huge, and I was like, my body was inside of it.
Interesting.
And I wasn't aware until I got here. And it's ironic because I came to a war zone, an actual one, right? I mean, an actual one in terms of like what when we say war zone, what we imagine, or when we say whatever war, what we imagine, which is very different from the type of war that, is there in the US. But
Yeah.
I really had this feeling. I was like, oh my God. And it was connected to information. It was connected to information. It was connected to how things are presented to me. Like I somehow like just being like an ocean away and watching the news, for example, at the time, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was like, whoa, I was seeing it in this way when I was there. And now I'm here and I'm like, what is this war that I was under like constantly? Like
Yeah.
I had this impression that yeah, it was very interesting. So coming from that place for me and then like being here and being present here and relating to people and things here, I had to kind of like re unlearn a lot of things, even unlearn things that, for example, I learned in that I thought that were supposed to be good from the perspective of humanitarian humanities, how to say, like, what's the word, like I studied women and gender
A
studies,
humanist.
humanist. I studied in a liberal arts college, very like I that's where I became politicized. That's where I started my activism. But still, I felt like I needed to unlearn all of the things I had
Yeah.
learned about colonization, decolonization, about feminism, about gender, about sexuality. I felt like I had to unlearn everything. Like I had to just
Yeah.
empty my brain so that I could have the space and the capacity to learn what I had to learn here.
Yeah.
And that's the place from which I relate, I think, more now. And so I'm interested in, I'm like, what can I learn? How are you doing this thing here that, people who come here and say, oh, they're backward and they're doing it wrong. I'm like, what is the way that you're doing that I can learn from? It
Mm-hmm.
sounds very like basic, but it's a genuine curiosity and it's a genuine actually trust. I think it comes from a trust that I feel like maybe you know something I don't,
Yeah.
as much, as better, as good, if it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I have so many thoughts. Like one of the things that, like what are people doing here that is different from the world from which I came and from which I still come, just 2 weeks ago, um, is the constant interaction, like the human connection that I think over the years is actually slowing.
Yeah.
And I feel that in my loved ones here, like that loss in that like life of connecting and being in connection. And now there's like, of course, in Armenia, there's like more capital in circulation, there's more money in circulation, and that in many ways impinges upon those social relations that like ways of socially relating that I discovered here. Like I was telling Luz, our friend and also who's been a guest on the podcast before, about how I have always, since my teenage years, suffered from seasonal depression, especially in the spring. The spring is always a time for me where I kind of just not break down, but I withdraw, and I have a lack of um feeling feeling a will to do things, a lack of a sense of like desire for for life, for um and I kind of withdraw and I kind of get, to say it very simply, like lazy. I can't do as much. And the only time in my life that I remember not happening to me was during the year that I lived here in Yerevan.
Interesting.
And I know exactly why, because no one will let you. No one will let you. Like even in like that spring when I really did want to withdraw, and I was really feeling those like I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to see anyone, I don't want to do anything. I remember like friends would like write or call and be like, "What are you doing?" And then of course if you don't respond, they get worried.
Yeah.
Right? Like I had friends who would like seriously get worried where after a couple of hours of texting or calling, if there was no response, they would actually come to my door, right? Which automatically forces you to like come out of whatever you're in. But there was like if you mention anything about not feeling great, people will force you to be in relation,
Mm.
right? Where you don't have the time and you don't have the space to feel that kind of disconnection of from life that is actually what, for me at least, gives spark to depression. So that was one of the things that I really learned here was, what it's like to live life in connection, which I think is something that it's not that it's lacking in the US where I live, but there's something very different here. Like there's a sense of like serious relation as a way of life here that I think is slowly also degrading, but it's still there.
It's so interesting because I'm like, as you say that, I feel like even in myself, there's this like, I'm like, I want to like move even more towards that. And like, I also know what you mean when you say it's sort of like seems to be getting less and less of that these days. And then at the same time, I'm wondering like, I mean, I'm still, I think there's a like a real like bravery. I have to call it a bravery or a courage to really like be able to constantly meet people, um, meet and connect for relating on a deep
Yeah.
level. And deep doesn't really necessarily have to mean like I want you to to not get me wrong. Like deep can be that, your neighbor comes over for coffee and you are in some thought that has been with you for days, and then somehow like through that ritual, the thought gets unknotted.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say deep. So it's not superficial. And it's also because your neighbor is also in a thought for days that needs to be unknotted, and you're doing it together.
Yeah.
And like, but I think it takes so much bravery, even more now, to be able to do that in each encounter with people, because it's somehow, I don't know what exactly is it that keeps coming between us, between people, that keeps getting in the way of people eh, relating to each other, on like connecting on in a meaningful way. Um, but I'm scared that that's sort of here already now, and it's because
Yeah.
I also feel, even within me, I feel like, oh, like that sounds scary. Like people didn't let you be, like people didn't let you be. There's force in there, and like, and at the
Yeah.
same time, I know that that's what I need. And well, that's what we all need, even more,
Yeah.
maybe now, because it's getting more and more easier to just retreat. I feel
Yeah.
like almost everything, all the conditions are being created constantly
Yeah.
and multiplied to make it easier for us to retreat than to meet. You see?
Yeah.
So it's and to the point where it's like a psychic technology already in my mind, of like that I'm even like, oh, but is that a good thing? Or would I, yeah, would I, what does it take for us to resist that, honestly? Because I'm also thinking about Nikita, who was, killed herself last week, and she was like dead for 3 days in her apartment before someone came. Why didn't I go? Why didn't I mean, she's not like in my immediate like.
Can you explain a little bit about Nikita for our
Yeah, so
audience?
Nikita is a trans woman, young woman, 21 years old, who killed herself last week. and who's part of the community, trans queer community here in Armenia. She was really brilliant. Like, when like I was quite, moved by her brilliance, to be honest, like just like the way that she thought and like the ideas that she had. So it was quite heartbreaking actually for me and for many people who knew her that she killed herself. And obviously, like, people don't just kill themselves, like, just because, like, there's reasons for that. And it makes me really sad that she had been dead for 3 days before she was found in her apartment. And it's so easy, it can be so easy to get into this place of like like it shouldn't be about like blaming anyone or like putting an individual burden on anyone, but or like so in my mind I was like, why did she retreat herself? Because she did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I'm like, what maybe this is the younger generation too, also like somehow there's even less spaces or possibilities because it's so trendy to be like, I don't have space for that right now. Like, I don't have the emotional capacity.
Yeah.
Like, I was talking about this. I don't remember if I talked to you about this, but like, yeah, it's one of the ways that like somehow it's like acceptable and it's become the norm to be able to say I don't have space for this. Like it's fine not to have space for something, obviously. At the same time, I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that even mean?
It's like when you're confronted with a reality that's difficult, sometimes you actually do have to swallow that reality in order to be present in the world in which it exists, especially for somebody else. And I think it's from that feeling that everyone has that feeling of not wanting to be confronted with difficult, even slightly uncomfortable things, right? Like I'm thinking, um, there's a difference between the retreat that you were describing and what Virginia Woolf calls a room of one's own, right? Which for
There's a
women
difference,
is
yeah.
that space where like you have to have the space. Like people have to leave you alone to a certain extent so that you can create.
Yeah.
And I think we all do that, right? Like in the we were in Stepanovan a short for a short time for 5 days and for 4 days. And in that time, I think there's this kind of like, um, in Armenian, the word is rubbing, shapum, right? Like, but there's that, but then there's also like the real, someone goes off, right, to write or to work on something, or sometimes just to like, to disconnect because they need it for, something that's happening in their mind or their body. Or in order to connect with someone else who's not there, right? Who's somewhere else. And I think that is like a room of one's own in a room that is full, right? That's not in retreat. But I think it's very different when, people start to think, I don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable, so I'm just going to stay in my own space and I'm not going to bother somebody, even though I feel really lonely, even though I feel, that there's no purpose in my life anymore, right? That somehow bothering somebody else with that is more harmful somehow than doing harm to yourself, right? And that's the like I remember how much people would help me when I first came to Armenia. Like people who I didn't know very well at all, right? Like and how much energy people would put into making sure I was okay, not because somehow I was like an important person to them, but because that's what you do. I mean, that's that way of life. Like that's how people live, right? Which is very different from where I come
Some
from, where
people
that's not.
would call that suffocating, like you're suffocating. Like in the West, I feel like people are like, oh,
Yeah.
like don't do that. Like let the person be. There's this really beautiful graffiti that Fearless Collective did. I think I don't remember where. I think it was in India somewhere. That I'm always remembering because with Fearless Collective, I collaborated with them with Beyond Borders, this project, the Turkish Armenian Kurdish project that I initiated many years ago. And Fearless Collective is like an artist activist collective who came out from I think there was this like really horrible like rape of this young woman in a bus many years ago, and it was huge, and so like the collective came from that, like that we just not allowing this to sort of like force us to be scared in the society. So they were going around in different places and then globally also, and creating murals, but with the communities of that place. If there was an issue there, they would go and they would create murals.
Yeah.
So one of the murals that the mural that I collaborated with them was in Burj in Lebanon. And then this one particular one that really stands out to me. So they would make an image based on storytelling and things they would have gatherings, and they still do this actually. It's quite an amazing project. And then they would come up with like a kind of like motto or like a sentence or some words to place underneath the mural. And there's a mural that is two women, like sort of something is connecting them, and it says bonded but not bound.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's such a perfect way of capturing the freedom of this way of relating and doing social relations, and the care that still you make sure the care stays there, and it's
Yeah.
not something that you say, no, this is all bad, it should go because it's forced or it's this or it's that. Like you're actually saying, no, let's extract, let's undo the knot. I keep talking about knots. Maybe we should talk
Yeah.
about the performance we did, but let's undo the knots and like not remove the thing that is like a life that is needed for us to continue from the thing that is harming, right? So
Yeah.
like I mean, and then also there's like a level of sort of trust, I guess, that you have to have, that it's like a dance, like it's like a negotiation. There was a time that I remember being like really like affected when I would be with a group of friends here, and one would say, I'm gonna go home now. And like some would be like, no, not yet, wait a little bit while. And I would always jump and be like, let the person go, they want to go. Um, because I was thinking I'm taking care of them, because if they're expressing a wish to go, that's
Yeah.
their wish. It's not like, it's not like they're saying no, like, why don't you get me to stay? And then sometimes they would get you to stay and you would enjoy it, but sometimes they would get you to stay and you would hate it. You'd be like, I should have left an hour ago when I wanted to.
Yeah.
So it's like how like I remember feeling a certain way about it and thinking like, oh, this shouldn't be at all. But now I'm like, no, this could be. And then how do we negotiate? How do we do the dance around
Yeah.
it so that it's like, okay, maybe we let like two times is enough, and then don't repeat it a third time if the person's like, no, I really want to go for myself. Like I just need to go, right? So yeah, not looking at it as like, oh, no, never do that. Like, no, it's actually sometimes I've seen wonderful, like successful cases where somebody was
This
like, no,
happened to
don't
me.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, when someone's like, no, don't go. And it's like you understand like how much like we need you, and then you feel, and then you get the energy if the reason you wanted to go was because you're like, I'm just so exhausted, I need to sleep. I mean, I don't know, like it's
Yeah.
complex, but like you get the energy just from that like need, because if it's in me, it's around. It's not just none of it is just one person's.
Yeah.
None of it is individual. So yeah, but do you want to talk about the knots or
Yeah, which is interesting because I hadn't thought about it. Like, so okay, we can kind of describe um after after I came, we wanted to do something, um some kind of thing that where we do it together. And with the collective, or with some members of the 61 collective, of which we've talked about before on this podcast, but Milan and I are both members of that collective. I'm a kind of side member in some ways because I'm very far away a lot of the time. But we decided to do a performance, and so I think that most of it came from your desired act.
Yeah, I wanted to comb my hair. But yeah, I mean, I never comb my hair. I have curly hair, so it's not like, yeah, it's not really something. It's like a very particular thing that happens if I comb my hair. But also like the connecting it to knots, like when I comb my hair, like the first let's say like layer of it is like a lot of knots have to be
Yeah.
combed out before I get to the smoothness of like the almost like the relaxing massage type of, yeah, like combing the
Yeah.
hair. And then Luz and the other Luz were working with yarn, and I was actually sitting
Hmm.
behind, like I was sitting with my back to them, so I didn't really see what exactly they were doing.
So they each had a full new ball of yarn that they were unraveling slowly and making a small ball, a more a denser ball of yarn out of the factory prepared ball of yarn. And as they unraveled and made the ball of yarn through each um, spool, I guess you would say,
Mhm.
they would then pass on their ball of yarn to one another so that they could each continue the other's work, so that the unraveling of these two balls of yarn was both of their work. Um, and in that time, I hadn't quite decided whether I was going to be a part of the performance or not. And so I decided to help out. Um, I I was going back and forth between Lucine and Lucine, who were each unraveling the balls of yarn and cleaning off the yarn that was kind of on the floor. We were doing this in Gomaigi, the children's park in Yerevan, and then was also um, taking the hair and kind of trying to unknot and then create a ball of yarn in some way of the hair that was
From
falling out of
Yeah,
your head as you brushed your hair.
yeah, yeah,
And so that became the performance and event on which we grounded a lot of conversations that we had after
yeah,
words about, why and what that each meant for us. And I mean, through it, like I learned a lot of, things. I mean, personally, as well as like more socially about, about you all. The fact that both Lucine Talalian and Lucine Sarkisian had both grown up in their childhood, spending a lot of time unraveling yarn, and each had very different ideas about it. So one said that they saw it as a waste of their time, why they had to, mom makes a sweater and then that sweater gets small the following year, so she then unravels the sweater, and of course the child has to help unravel the yarn from the sweater so that she can make another sweater or make something else with the yarn so it doesn't go to waste. And both of them had been involved in these processes as children, but Lucina Sarkisian felt that this was an activity that she really liked because it gave her a sense of responsibility as a child. Like she wasn't really trusted enough to like knit a sweater yet, which she does now. Um, but that she was allowed to participate in this very important act of knitting and of creating.
yeah. I mean, I think it's important that we also talked about how this is kind of unproductive sort of thing that was being done, right? You were talking about that.
Hmm.
Like meaningless um thing. Mm. And at the same time, I'm thinking like there's something so poetic about it. Maybe poetry is unproductive. I don't know.
But I think meaningless in the sense that, it's meaningless as in we didn't make anything.
Yeah,
And in some ways, even the performance was meaningless because there was no audience.
yeah,
It wasn't
true.
even entertainment, right, for
True, yeah,
somebody.
true.
It wasn't even an art event for people to come
Yeah.
and feel like they were,
Yeah.
witnessing. But that meaninglessness also points to the very real meanings of certain things, the very real meaning of what it means to use yarn over and over again,
Yeah, that's true.
and what it means to in the brushing of your hair, to enlarge in your hair, to make it take up space. um
That's true. That's true.
yeah.
I was also thinking with the with this image of like when you were saying this is mom would knit a sweater and then it would be too small the next year and then she would undo it. I was thinking, oh, like that's a whole year of a life inside of a sweater. Like there's a body in a sweater. That's you're wearing that sweater when you go and you buy some groceries. You're wearing that sweater when you go eat, when you go play. Like there's a whole life that happened in that sweater, and then it goes a year later and it's being like unraveled
Yeah.
to be put back again. And then like though the thread has already lived that life, and then maybe something's being added to it.
Yeah.
And then that's an expansion too, no?
Yeah.
I mean, just in that case, but to me, it's like it's very poetic and it's also very like very much about the living of life.
Yeah.
Um,
And it reminded me also, and about Soviet and post-Soviet life.
yeah.
I mean, like I'm an anthropologist, so these are like the kinds of questions that I'm constantly kind of like thinking about, the everyday life making,
Mm,
in particular political economic contexts. And so like, as a result of like age and different times in which the two Lucines are like children, right?
mm.
One is doing that in the Soviet years and one is doing that in the post-Soviet years.
That's true.
And in the post-Soviet years, that practice of like sorry, I've also gotten sick in the time that I've been here. Um in the Soviet years, it might have been a question of shortage, like systemic shortage,
Yeah.
right? Where there really is not enough yarn to go around, and so people are thinking about making use of the things they already have. And it's not because of poverty or an inability to buy something new. It's because it's a production issue.
Hmm.
There's less being produced, and thus, distributed. In the post-Soviet years, like it's not a question of a lack of it's not a question of shortage. It's a question of actual extreme lack of
Yeah.
poverty,
Yeah.
of if you have the money, you can go and buy it. It's there now,
I wouldn't
but it's
even,
not accessible.
I feel like there we need to use a verb instead of poverty, impoverishment, or like
Yeah.
being made poor
Yeah.
to really like clarify that it's not just some thing that fell from the sky upon
Yeah, like all of a
people.
sudden people got
Yeah.
poor.
Yeah.
They were
No,
like,
it's
yeah.
an impoverishment making poor, making people live in that
And
under those
like
conditions.
if I can kind of make, the connections between different parts of our trip as well as the conversation that we were having before, because I've
Yeah.
been like, thinking
Yeah.
about this. One of the things that really bothers me the most about a certain kind of diaspora gaze on Armenia, and I've seen this so much, is that kind of like, oh, these poor people, they were under Soviet oppression for like decades. No wonder they're so fucking backwards now, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I remember, like I'm left, right? I'm left oriented. And so always there was that kind of fascination for me with like the Soviet Union and like whatever. But I think that's not, it doesn't come out of some kind of like fetishization of communism through which now I see Armenia through this like, fantastical lens or something. But I remember being released like maybe I was like 11 or 12 years old, and I knew already, even though it was like post Cold War, I knew already that like communism was bad. At some point, communists were like an enemy, the commies were bad, and but I didn't know what communism was. Like I didn't know what it meant. And so I asked my dad because I also knew that my dad grew up in so-called communism, and I wondered like what is that? Like, what does it mean that he grew up in communism? And so I asked my dad, I'm like, what is communism? He's like, communism is an ideology that everyone should be equal. And I remember just being like completely like shocked by that. Like what the fuck? Like how is that like the worst thing ever that we are all against? And he was like, but it doesn't work. And I'm like, but as an idea, isn't that like the best thing?
And it was being practiced.
Like,
Some
yeah.
tried at least.
And it's like,
There
yeah,
was an
like
attempt.
the Soviet Union was not, I mean, the Soviet Union was a state, and like all states, it, committed a lot of harms, and
Yeah.
there were a lot of problems. But I mean, that idea that, these people are still coming out of communism, the more Armenia comes out of communism, the worse it gets in the same
Yes.
ways that, like you were
Yes.
describing.
Yeah.
Like the more difficult social relations become. And I think that those social relations really do have a lot to do with the communist past.
Yes.
Though, like a real ideological belief that maybe it was not necessarily ideologically driven in personal life, but that just overarching belief that people are equal and belong together in the same society, and people should help each other, and that does not exist. Does not exist under capitalism. Not even as a fucking ideology does it. It doesn't exist. And yeah, so I was really excited to go to Stepanova.
Yeah, me too, because I just love the nature there.
Yeah.
And that it's like another part. It feels like a part that is not as touristy as other parts.
Yeah.
So I really feel like that's a perfect place to go for just peace of mind and to be cut off from the world in a way. But what were you excited
Yeah.
about? Why were you excited to go there?
So listeners, if you are, if you're gonna go to Armenia and you wanted to, we know everyone goes to Yerevan, which, is fine. But Stepanovan is a city where there's the Stepan Shahumyan Museum, House Museum. It's a museum built in 1978 by the Soviet Union that literally is a building that contains the house of Stepan Shahumyan, who was from very early at the end of the 19th century was already someone who was organizing Marxist groups in the Caucasus and was very involved in the organization of the revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, here in Armenia, as well as in Tiflis, in Tbilisi, which is actually very close to Stepanovan, and was, opened a printing press there. And there's a model of the printing press that's actually that was located in Tbilisi, where you see really like the kind of the commitment that people had to revolution, because they were ideologically driven by the sense of justice and equality and fighting against exploitation. That honestly, I felt so refreshed from seeing that history. And I also felt really sad that there's such little of that kind of inspiration and will anymore to build a printing press underneath a house, a completely secret printing press, so that you can make flyers and so that you can convince people to take off their chains and to liberate themselves. And yeah, we also went to Mayor Zod, which is where Shahumyan would collect with the Marxist club that he had organized in the very small city before it was called Stepanovan. Of course, it's named after him later. Um, and there they would go into this cave um, of this like canyon that goes down into a river because there was protection from sound and the sound of the water where they could have open conversations about Marxism. And it's also very beautiful there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it seems like there's a sort of like the somewhat of that spirit is still has
mm,
been preserved here in this place. But I would say that spirit is preserved in most places. Like when you leave Yerevan and you
mhm.
go outside of Yerevan, you go to any other city, at least, well, it wouldn't be fair if I say all the places, because like for the most part, in recent years, I go more towards the north than I go towards the south. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
for the most part, there's this. I mean, we also have this like the way that people are perceived in different places, right? They're like, oh, like these lo people from Loretinere, like they're like
Yeah.
this specific way. They're like really kind and open-hearted. And then you have like some other place, they're like, oh, they're very hospitable. So I
Yeah.
think maybe like part of it is also that that's just the vibe in this particular region of people just being very like open and kind and just willing to really like just connect with you actually.
Yeah.
Which kind of like for me, like I was telling Tamar, I had an experience last year. Again, it was in Alaverdi region. So is that considered Lori or is that Tabush?
I don't know.
It doesn't matter. It's also north, but I was there and I initially went with this kind of like thing of like I'm gonna be seen as strange and weird, and I'm like somehow like gonna be feel bad. I'm gonna feel othered, ostracized. And that eventually, like the lesson learned of that trip, I took that trip alone, was that I was the one who was doing that to people,
Yeah.
and seeing them as like, oh, like these people who are living in like smaller towns and have very different lives, very slow, very like just very different lives. And it was me who was judging them actually, and who was like, yeah, I was projecting my own things. And so I wasn't like I felt like I
Yeah.
wasn't really, but I was also alone. It was easier because like Luz and the other Luz, they're both so like just like they're so talkative, they're not shy, they don't
Yeah.
think that they're weird in that space. Like they feel
Yeah.
like that's where they belong. I feel it too, but I was also called a nachbar in the store. So
Yeah.
like there's a reason why. I mean, all of us could have been called that, I think.
I
Um,
am that.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it was very like, yeah, it was a nice experience. When you were talking about Stepan Shahmian's museum, I was thinking I started to like go in the future and imagine like if things keep going as they're going, one day they're going to try to erase, like just close that or like make it change the name of the town, make it like as if this never existed. And that really made me sad. And it's kind of scary to imagine that that's where we could end up.
And like we actually we had a conversation about that on our way there. I was just standing outside of the building before going in. I mean, this was in some ways like a pilgrimage for me because because I'm a leftist and a Marxist, and this is like a really, really important historical site. In the same way it was like when I visited Marx's grave in London. Um, but we were taught like I was thinking about how this museum still exists and Stepanovan is still called Stepanovan.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Soviet names of cities have been changed. Leninakan,
Yeah.
Kirovakan. Um, and largely I think because they're not like national, right? They're not Armenian. Stepan Shahmian obviously was
Ah,
Armenian.
interesting. Yeah.
But that story, right, the story of, building the revolution doesn't really serve Armenian national interest today. But what I found kind of shocking was that they were renovating the interior. and we couldn't actually go inside his house that was in the building.
They were renovating his house
They were
or the
renovating
building?
his house. They were painting the interior of his
That's
house.
amazing.
And they had, taken so much care to remove all of the personal belongings and to keep it safe in storage while they painted and restored it. I mean, they're constantly restoring this house to not lose it. And clearly there's governmental investment there.
Yeah,
But I think that that has a lot more to do with the fact that this is like that museum is one of the main reasons why anyone goes there,
that's true.
right? And they don't want to lose that as a tourist site. And when we even asked the woman who was guiding us through the museum, what do people what do people in Stepanavon do? Like what is a main source of income of production? And she told us that there's no production, right? There's no production in Stepanavon. People own shops, they
Yeah.
sell necessary needs and services and goods to one another who live there. A lot of people are migrant laborers who go, elsewhere to Russia and so on to work and come back and bring remittance money. Um, but that museum is one of the few places that still also employs people because tourists come.
That's true.
And so they can't really lose that. But
Yeah.
I also have your anxiety because I think if they could lose that, they would easily lose it.
Yeah, I think so
Yeah.
too. I think so too. Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we finish?
I mean, I think it's also like for those of us who do live here, these encounters, we started off by talking about Armenia as a meeting ground. Um, and for us also like we who live here, although like I travel quite a lot, so I have other meeting points, I guess, to see people, but it's always like it's always a really nice way to kind of bring in something and add it to it's like the sweater, like when you
Yeah.
like undo it, unravel it to like add a new things to it. So I think that that's really important for that movement to constantly be, even though I get annoyed in the summer because there's so many people in Armenia and I like the peace and quiet. But um no, I think it's really important to have this. And what you were saying in the beginning about having people researching, coming and researching in Armenia, like I mean, I'm with you. I think I have like more bad experiences than good ones. That's why I'm speaking like that, where it's more extractive, like what I've seen, more extractive and just for the purposes of being able to say I'm an expert in Armenia and like which is really ridiculous. So that's where I was coming from. But overall, I think it would be really cool to have, yeah, like it would be really cool to have. I always say this, like that I want us to have like us here and this way of yeah, like to have more influence on others than others on us, because I think most of the time people here also see themselves through the gaze of the diaspora, so they think that they are backward or they think they have things to learn. They don't know good enough. But I think that what I would like is for something to be for people who do come here to reflect back to the people here how full of knowledge and wisdom people are here, and then for the people to feel that that's you need that kind of affirmation sometimes. Yeah, and then to actually be the ones who are influencing and affecting with this way of relating and this way of being in connection with other people and yeah, continuing life more than what can come from the outside as a kind of thing to stop that or to 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 shift that current in a direction that feels off or like not makes it harder to breathe. Like
Yeah.
I would rather that what is here is added to as opposed to taken from to
Yeah.
bring something that doesn't feel like it helps us breathe
Yeah.
or continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah, let's end it.
And I want to also say that Milena has been like the most gracious host. It's now public knowledge that that's the case. So yeah, it's been really good for me to be here and to be in this connected and togetherness space. So thank you for listening. Please please subscribe if you haven't already. Please comment. We again had a very vulnerable discussion, so please comment and say something. We really do appreciate those who do comment.
Yeah.
And it does mean a lot for us to have that kind of engagement. So thank
Yeah.
you for those who have commented. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.